You guys, I am so excited that I finally just published that episode. I know it's not perfect, and that's okay. It's progress, not perfection. And I want to start every episode going forward with an affirmation for everyone and for myself. You are not broken. You adapted to what you were given, and you can adapt now. If you're in active addiction and you want to change, that's okay. Today is today, tomorrow is tomorrow. If you're already clean and sober, good for you. Not a lot of people can say that. Either way, you are not broken and there is a way out. So today, I'm going to share more about my own story so that you get to know who I am. Bethany, the podcast host, the mom, the sister, the daughter, the granddaughter, the friend, and the podcast host of Addictive Personalities, and why I'm doing this now. So it begins at 12 years old. I was a shell of myself. Looking back, I know that now. And I didn't have a lot of guidance. But I met someone in seventh grade. Her name was Monique, and she had friends that were, on the other side of the tracks, one can say. Older, gangbanger types, whatever. Just bad people. But I didn't know that, and I felt accepted. So when I was hanging out with her on that same day, I smoked cigarettes for the first time. I cussed for the first time. I drank for the first time. I did meth for the first time. I started a fight that day, and I smoked weed all on the same day. Like I did all of the things on the same day. And then I kind of woke up. Like it felt like I had come out of this zombie state. And I, was constantly trying to seek validation from others. I lied, I told stories. I just wanted to be accepted and loved. But that day, once I started doing drugs, I found, I don't know, it was kind of just like an awakening. But then again, I was 12. So what do I know? Anyway, I recreationally used and drank, more so smoking weed and drinking. And then once I hit 15, I learned how to smoke meth. So I had been doing lines here and there, on the weekends or whatever, staying up all night writing poetry. But then I learned how to smoke it, and that was it. Everything else is history. From that point, I was hanging out with full-grown adults, not realizing exactly what kind of situations I was in during this time. It was a daily thing. I was addicted. At that point, fully addicted. And I realized this, and I was hanging out with people who were twice my age, sometimes 3 times my age, um and I did still have the sense that I didn't want to end up like them or be like them. I didn't want to go like full deep tweaker, right? Like I saw what that was and where these people were in their lives, and there was something in me that said, "Yeah, I'm not looking to be that, but this is still fun." I had people offering to shoot me up when I was 15, and I always kind of had a snobby attitude towards that. During this time, I was like, "No, like I'm already loving smoking. I'm not trying to love doing drugs more. This is cool." There was still that line I wouldn't cross, and I do feel like that was spiritual for me. Like there was such something inside me that said, "Yeah, probably not." But through these years, I was, kicked out of the house, very reactive, very volatile, very strong personality. I was hard to deal with. But I met lots of people, strangers, you know, all the time. And I had some traumatic things happen to me during this period of time as well. There was a point where I ended up moving to Chicago. That was short lived. I came back to California, back on the streets. And then I decided that I needed a change. So I called my dad and I moved back to Chicago when I was 19. And when I did that, I did okay for a little bit. But then I ended up addiction swapping, which is common. There was no meth, but I ended up meeting someone who was a heroin addict and dating him and living with him. I was also drinking a lot. I was also doing cocaine. I tried heroin a couple times with him, realizing that really wasn't my thing. But cocaine was a reasonable alternative from my perspective. You know, the reason why I wanted to be in Chicago was because there was no meth. So I thought I was safe. So while I wasn't doing meth, though, I was abusing alcohol and doing hard substances, but I was still able to work. So you could call me a somewhat functioning addict. Like I did have a double life. Um, then I ended up moving back to California, and very quickly I relapsed. So this would be in 2005. Um, Lots of things happening during that time. Um, but yeah, I relapsed pretty quickly after moving back in November of 2005. But it wasn't until I got pregnant that changed everything, right? At this point, I'm 30, it's 2013, and I struggled because I was still in that environment and I wanted to have an abortion. And I had already made multiple appointments to do that. And something always messed it up. And my grandparents, I did share with my grandparents that I don't think that I could, or I didn't think that I could handle a pregnancy or a child in the mental condition I was in, and they would not accept that. And their power of prayer is so strong. They called me up, and I was so resistant to this, but they prayed with me, and I was crying, and I didn't want to hear it, and I was like so conflicted. And I had my daughter's father in my ear saying, we don't want to bring a child into this lifestyle. And I just knew that that was wrong. Um, so I felt very conflicted. And that same day, it was a Friday in March, um, the cops came. After that prayer, the cops came. They took him away on a warrant. And I was left there in his house alone. And all of a sudden, it was like everything changed. Everything in front of me was telling me not to have an abortion. And I decided that day that I was going to have my child. And that's where my desire became different, because before that, I had no reason to plan anything. It was day by day. It was survival mode, fight or flight. Just, how am I going to get through the next day? Who am I going to have to put myself around? But then after that, I had something to protect and something to live for. That was the first shift, um, a bigger shift from before. Because before I would just look at these people and say like, yeah, I don't want to be 50 and using, like in my mind. I'm not judging people who are using and are 50. I'm just saying when I was 15, 16, 17, even in my 20s, like I knew what I was meant for more, right? And not all the people I was hanging around were great people. So I didn't want to become a bad person or be defined by my drug addiction. But then when I got pregnant, it was like, okay, well, now I have a purpose, a real purpose, because I didn't love myself enough for me to be the purpose. But now I had my kid, right? And I think that that's the part people don't really talk about, not just how addiction starts, but what it takes to actually face it. Like, it's scary, right? Like, what is it that we're running from? What is it that we're hiding from? And is there ever anything to run towards? I think that's the question. Like, if you really don't have anything to run towards, then why feel bad about being but using or being in an active addiction, right? I mean, honestly, if there's something telling you that you want to stop, what's that reason, right? What are you trying to get towards? And what is the drug or the substance you're addicted to keeping you from dealing with? So for me, it wasn't just one decision. It was a series of moments where I had to choose something different, even when I didn't fully believe in myself yet, right? I didn't know what I was doing. I felt this divine pull that like, hey, you are valuable. I didn't know why. I didn't necessarily really believe it, but it was something that kept me from going darker, right? That kept me from like crossing that line to the darkness. Um, but that's how I got here, essentially. Like there's more to it, right? Which will come up in later episode. But where I want to talk about what happens after, um, because stopping isn't the end of the story, right? It's actually where things start to get real, and you know there will be episodes where I talk about the rules of recovery. Like, is that what's stopping you? Like, whose rules are you really, adhering to, right? Like, it shouldn't be, there is no prescription for getting off drugs or alcohol or anything that you're addicted to, right? You have to face yourself, and it's only you who is accountable, right? I know that there's several ways to do it, and there is no right or wrong way, right? Except for what you know. But don't let somebody else's rules or somebody else's path or somebody else's, um, you know, decisions or somebody else's experience dictate yours. It can influence yours, it can help yours, but you get to decide what your next step is and why. Like, we should really do a value proposition at some point, like write it down, like say, okay, like here's current state and here's future state. But sometimes it's so scary to even look at a future state because we've never had to. When we're in an active addiction and we're just like in the turmoil, in a tornado of just like absolute darkness and chaos and evil and, deprecating situations and like self-loathing situations, you're not thinking about, well, what can I become? Right? And you often end up leaving those situations feeling exactly what those situations are meant to make you feel, like a piece of shit. Shame, guilt, remorse, and I'm actually really proud of myself. And I am very open about my past, and I want to spread that. I want to encourage people to embrace it. If you're on the other side of this, like there's a reason for that, right? If you're thinking about being on the other side of this, there's a reason for that, right? Guilt and shame are always going to continue the cycle. And I want the guilt, in my perfect world, I want the guilt and the shame and the stigma to be removed, because actually some of the best people out there are the ones who've struggled the most and who are accountable, right? And who have faced their trauma head on. So that's just a little bit of background about me. I would love to hear from anyone who's listening who has a story to tell. I know that eventually I do want to have guests, and I do want to share stories with y'all and learn about what methods or paths you took, right? And again, I just want to make it very clear that I don't have all the answers. I just know my own true story, my own struggles. I have my opinions, I have my thoughts. Some of them are controversial, some of them, but I'm not saying that my thoughts or opinions are right, right? And I am always willing to have those discussions and debates, because I'm me, and what worked for me may not work for somebody else, and what worked for somebody else may not work for me. And I just want to leave you with this. I'm so pumped to continue sharing these episodes with you, and I hope you'll come back. And as I get better at this, so will, the episodes themselves, the audio quality. Eventually, I hope to be on video. Eventually, I hope to have a really, structured, outlined, episode list and music and really cool marketing, but we're not there yet. This is just the beginning, and I hope that you'll stay through this journey with me.